Hi guys, what's going on, and welcome back to another episode of New World. So we have recently another developer diary released, which goes into quite a few details about some of the factions, some of the settlements, and kind of some of the governance mechanics in these factions. So I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a dive into this developer blog, pull out some of the key information I think we're presented and what we can learn from it, and kind of find out a little bit more information about how kind of the faction wars are going to work and what the settlements are going to look like in the game. I think perhaps the thing we need to cover first is factions, because these are really going to underpin a lot of how the companies and the settlement mechanics are going to work. So first thing to know, there are going to be 3 different factions in the game, and before a player can join any company or any guild, they are going to need to select which faction they want to be part of. And factions and guilds are going to be locked together, so any company is going to belong to a specific faction. So therefore, if you want to play with a certain group of friends or certain group of people, you need to make sure you are selecting the same faction as those people, or as that guild leader, if you want to be joining their company. Because if you don't, you're effectively going to be locked out of joining that company, because that company belongs to a specific faction. So once the company leader has got his faction pinned down, he then has the option to create the company. As previously mentioned, this company will then belong to the same faction as the one that the guild leader is currently in. This company will then have the option to claim land. So if the territory is uncontrolled, then supposedly it's just going to be a simple claim fee. So at the start of the game, I suspect there's going to be a fairly big dash to try and grab land, because it's going to be able to claimable without actually a war kicking off. However, if a company is trying to claim land which is already owned by another company, then a factional war will break out. There's a couple of important things to note here. We expect these faction wars are going to be 50v50 siege battles at the territories fort, because the territories are going to have both towns and forts, and it appears like the PvP side in a factional battle will only occur at the fort. It's also important to know that companies of the same factions can't fight each other. So it seems that if you desire a piece of land, but it gets claimed by another company which belongs to one of the same three factions that you belong to, you will not be able to declare war against it. You'll either have to wait till an enemy faction takes it, and you could then take it back from them, or you'll maybe have to work something out with that company to try and secure it diplomatically, but you are not going to be able to declare war. So all things aside, you've managed to take this land, whether you've purchased it at the start of the game or whether you've managed to take it in a territory war. What is actually the point in holding territory? Well, as I touched on previously, you're both going to get a settlement and a fort. So the fort is going to be dealing purely with the defensive side, with the PvP side. I think we expect this to be upgradable, this fort, to help you in the siege or the defence of siege of your territory, but that's something we don't really know a great deal about. It's probably going to be covered by Amazon in a separate developer blog. But we do know more about the settlement. So this is really where you're going to be sort of setting your homes, this is where you're going to be doing trade, this is where you're going to take part in missions, craft, refine items, take faction missions, and where your company is going to be based. It's going to be sort of your hub. This is where you're going to put all your resources, where you're going to make all your items, and where you're going to sort of build your adventure from. And there are a couple of sort of key take-home points from the developer blog that I think I've kind of identified. Firstly, unless you set a house or build or own a house inside a settlement, you do not get many of the settlement bonuses associated with it. So as the settlement upgrades, certain bonuses and benefits are going to become available to its residents. It doesn't specify specifically what these are going to be, but these are going to be like smithy upgrades, carpentry upgrades, which enable you to build better equipment, to craft better materials, to get bonuses for certain crafting, etc, as you would expect with an MMO of this type. And that's going to be important because I think there's going to be a certain cost associated with building a home, and you're probably going to be limited to one. So you're going to be wanting to try and set this in the land that your company owns. And this is all well and good, but there's one area of this which I kind of like quite a bit less, and that is when a territory gets taken over by an opposing faction, the people who have houses in that territory do not automatically get kicked out. So that means you could end up governing a territory which has sort of significant numbers of players from opposing factions. Now, while initially on the paper, on the face of it, this might not seem that bad, that kind of means basically enemies can set up their base camp in the middle of your town, in the middle of your settlement. and we don't know exactly how many of these mechanics are going to be fully implemented, but that seems to me like it's going to open itself up possibly to a little bit of abuse there. Quite easily be a bit of trolling going on from sort of enemy players, particularly when it comes to then enemies trying to retake over that settlement. How is that going to work with those 50-50 PvP fights? Are they going to be able to assist the enemy to retake their settlement? Are they sort of almost going to be sort of spies or saboteurs in amongst your mix? So that's going to kind of be interesting to see how that develops. I would have rather have seen the settlement sort of faction locked, so it's owned by faction A, then really only residents from faction A can reside in that settlement. So what about the town projects? So these appear to be basically a series of large-scale company quests which everyone has to partake in and contribute to try and upgrade certain elements of the settlement. For example, in this case in the top left you can see upgrading the carpentry, and you can see the various missions that are required to sort of help achieve this. And the completion of each mission gives sort of a small amount of gold to the player, but more importantly it contributes the resources required to start the upgrade towards the next level. These have to be initially activated by the town's governor, so that's the leader of the company which owns the territory. But once activated, they're going to be contributable to by all players, and that probably includes players of opposing factions, as I kind of touched on earlier, who could still be residing in that settlement. Obviously, upgrading these is going to be really worthwhile for the settlement. You know, upgrading things like the smithy is obviously going to enable you to craft better equipment, better weapons, better armour, etc. It's going to enable you to improve your character. But more than that, it's also going to level up the settlement. It's maybe going to attract more people to come and live here because the settlement is going to be more desirable. In turn, the governor is going to be able to collect more taxes from your company. Maybe more trade will start to occur in your settlement, which will again increase the amount of tax collected, all of which is going to contribute and build up the desirability of the area. This tax, while possibly lining the governor's pocket, is also going to go some way to paying the upkeep that is required on all settlements. So long as the settlements meet the upkeep requirement, which is going towards their faction each week, then a settlement will sustain and will not level down. But if a settlement fails to pay the required upkeep, then we can expect the settlement to level down. We don't know exactly what form this down leveling is going to take, whether it will be an immediate effect, whether it will level back some of those town projects that people have been working hard on, or whether it's just going to be sort of a temporary effect, we do not know. But it kind of goes to show how important it is going to be joining a good guild, and a guild which is going to properly manage the settlement. So finally we come to the information that the governor gets to see in their own little desk display. I kind of liked how this is called the governor's desk. It's kind of cool, suggests the governor may have his own house somewhere in the settlement, which he gets automatically. And from here we get to learn quite a lot. We get to see the territory upkeep. Obviously this figure of 5,000 gold, quite a significant amount, but we see kind of what the settlement has been earning since probably the previous week, and we also know how long that has left he has to pay that before the upkeep expires, and we see that in this sort of territory downgrade bar we get to see. The fact there's actually a downgrade bar suggests that it's probably not going to be immediate, but maybe after a week or two, or maybe 3 weeks of failing to pay the upkeep, or maybe only partially paying the upkeep, we'll see the settlement start to de-level. We also get to see the faction which the company belongs to, as well as how long ago it has been since the company actually managed to establish and hold this territory. It is also kind of cool to see that there appears to be a company emblem up in the top of the screen in that little red banner there. That's kind of cool to see. Hopefully we're going to be able to get customizable emblems sort of throughout the game. I think that is something that is available in one of the pre-order packs. There's some mention of a customizable emblem as part of that pack, so kind of cool to see that that's going to be available and there's some customization going on there. We get a little bit of information down in the bottom in sort of taxes and fees. It seems to be like the 5.3% maybe the tax on crafting and creating weapons and armour, as well as housing, possibly trade, and maybe that might be crafting in terms of the woodwork and stuff like that. So it's interesting that tax rates are going to be variable, and it seems that there's quite sort of a precise amount of setting up to one decimal place. Kind of cool to see that the taxes are going to be quite variable and kind of can be adjusted town to town. So all in all, I think this has been quite an interesting developer blog. It's nice that they're finally starting to push into a little bit more detail in some of the specifics, particularly after we had the perhaps personally rather disappointing PvP information in the last blog. It's nice to see a little bit more detail about how they plan to flesh this out with some of the factional stuff. I have some concerns around how these factions are going to work in terms of opposing factions being able to live in your settlements. I'm kind of interested to see how that's going to work and how that's going to tie in with the companies and factions, because there could be some risk of sort of sabotage or sort of griefing and trolling there, and I'm interested to know how they plan to counter that. I'd have also liked to see some gameplay or a little bit more in the way of screenshots. Hopefully supposedly the developer video is actually still in development and coming out very soon, so we've got that to look forward to, and hopefully that's going to feature a little bit more gameplay, because it'll be really interesting to see some more actual features of the game, particularly as we are now only a matter of months away from possibly the beta release, so we'd all like to see a little bit more detail actually put out there. But anyway, that's all I've actually got for you today. I'll be really interested to hear what people think about kind of this dev blog so far. Are you pleased with the sort of faction information received, or is it kind of disappointing to you? Do let me know in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe to the channel, because we're going to be having a load more New World content as this game keeps pushing forwards closer to its release date, particularly as this next video blog comes out, hopefully over the next week or so, because I'm really excited to see what information that's going to be giving us and what we can get out of it. So yeah, let me know in the comments, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I shall see you guys all in the next video.